Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 12 to 1947, Roswell Incident. Anatomy of the world's most infamous UFO event. If you are ever looking for the ultimate itinerary to break your brain, I highly recommend starting with a failed diplomatic mission to the Zuni Nation. Immediately upgrading to a personal encounter with a glowing emerald quantum bird that hijacks your nervous system, and topping it all off with a 6-hour road trip to Roswell, New Mexico. It really puts your standard weekend getaway to shame. My friends who live in Albuquerque and I had initially driven out to the Zuni reservation, hoping to sit down and chat with some tribal elders. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the day of the Sacred Crown dance, which, as it turns out, is a terrible time to schedule an impromptu Q&A session with the tribal leadership. So, striking out there, we headed back for the evening. That night is when things went completely off the rails. While driving, a UAP decided to tag along and follow us for a while, just to make sure we were properly unsettled. But the real main event happened when I finally got back home and crawled into bed. A shining emerald green quantum bird materialized right out of thin air in front of me. Before I could even ask if it wanted a cracker, it flew straight into the back of my neck. My consciousness instantly went offline coma, and I have zero recollection of what happened next until I woke up the following morning. If you want the full unvarnished director's cut of this spiritual hijacking, you can actually listen to the story on YouTube under the title 2012 Ascension Syndrome, The Golden Alchemy. Hosted on the exact same channel as this podcast, the Paranormal State, PNW, Washington. Anyway, waking up with the quantum bird freshly installed in your cervical spine is apparently great motivation for a road trip, because the very next morning we packed into the car and headed toward Roswell, with a Trinity site scheduled for later. Getting from Albuquerque to Roswell is a grueling, sun-baked 6-hour drive across the high desert. When we finally rolled into town, I have to confess, Roswell itself is a bit of a tourist trap. Aside from the official UFO museum, which was fine but honestly nothing spectacular, there is basically nothing to see there except an alarming number of neon green alien statues. Yet, despite the kitschy gift shops and plastic flying saucers glued to every street lamp, the town had an undeniable presence. The entire place was absolutely radiating an extreme ET vibe. Just soaking in that peculiar frequency was satisfaction enough for me. Even though we didn't end up swinging by the actual UFO crash site on our way down toward Trinity. And I'm not just talking about tourist marketing. That particular vibrational signature hanging over the town felt intimately familiar to me. It is the exact same frequency I felt passing through the Yakima Training Center and across countless other UAP encounters cluttering up my personal files. I call it the ET vibe, and it was wrapped around Roswell like a warm, slightly intimidating cosmic blanket. You can keep your flashy museum exhibits and your tinfoil hats. For me, just stepping foot in that town after a run-in with an interdimensional emerald bird was enough to confirm one thing. The universe is deeply weird, and New Mexico is practically running the gift shop. To understand the modern landscape of ufology, government secrecy, and public skepticism, one must return to the scorching desert of southeastern New Mexico in July 1947. Known simply as the Roswell Incident, this event stands as the undisputed ground zero of the global UFO phenomenon, a legendary collision between a top-secret military project, a severe summer storm, and what many researchers believe was the physical recovery of extraterrestrial technology and non-human biological remains. To understand how a sleepy New Mexico ranching community accidentally hijacked human history, you have to look at the frantic 7-day domino effect of July 1947. What unfolded over that single week wasn't just a military mishap, it was a masterclass in panic, bureaucratic crossed wires, and public relations whiplash that has kept conspiracy theorists happily employed for nearly 80 years. Phase 1, Mac Brazel meets his new lawn ornament late June to July 4, 1947. Picture the scene. A violent desert thunderstorm is raging across New Mexico, and ranch foreman William Mac Brazel hears an almighty explosion tearing through the nocturnal gloom. Being a practical cowboy, he thinks nothing of it, because when your job involves dodging tumbleweeds and cattle, a loud bang is just Tuesday. By Independence Day, Brazel is out riding the Foster Ranch near Corona when he discovers his property has turned into a shimmering, high-tech recycling center. The debris field is massive, and the materials are frankly offensive to the laws of physics. He finds an ethereal foil that you can crumple into a ball, only for it to instantly pop back into a flat sheet without a single crease. There are tough plastic strips with strange floral symbols, and wood-like sticks that are impossibly light, completely unbreakable, and stubbornly refuse to burn when Brazel tries to start a campfire with them. If you're ever looking to build a spaceship out of craft store supplies, Mac Brazel found the blueprint. Phase 2, dragging the sheriff into it, July 4th to July 7th, 1947. At first, Brazel just rolls up a bundle of weird foil, shows it to the neighbors, and goes back to work because cows don't milk themselves. But by Monday, July 7th, the country is buzzing with wild stories about flying discs thanks to pilot Kenneth Arnold's recent encounter over Mount Rainier. Prompted by his neighbors, Brazel finally loads up his truck and drives into town to dump a pile of cosmic debris right onto the desk of Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcox. Sheriff Wilcox takes one look at the unbreakable sticks and uncreasable foil, realizes this is slightly above his pay grade of dealing with stray livestock, and uses his telephone to call the Roswell Army Airfield Intelligence Office. Big mistake. Huge. Phase 3, Major Marcel's Midnight Show and Tell, July 7th to 8th, 1947. Interbase Intelligence Officer Major Jesse Marcel and Counterintelligence Agent Captain Sheridan Cavett. They pack into a car with Brazel, drive out to the ranch, and spend hours scooping up every weird fragment they can find. Marcel is a seasoned intelligence officer. He knows what conventional airplane crash debris looks like. This stuff isn't it. So confident is he in the bizarreness of his findings that on his way back to base late on the night of July 7th, he makes a detour to his own house. He wakes up his wife and young son, Jesse Jr., in the middle of the night just to say, "Hey, look at this indestructible space trash." Young Jesse Jr. spent the rest of his life talking about that glowing feather-light foil, cementing a family memory that would haunt the Air Force for decades. Arriving at RUF headquarters on July 8th, Marcel briefs Space Commander Colonel William H. Blanchard. "Sir, this definitely isn't a Cessna." Phase 4, the Oopsie Daisy press release, July 8th, 1947. Colonel Blanchard does something that everyone involved would later regret with every fiber of their being. He tells Public Information Officer Walter Haut to draft a press release. By the morning of July 8th, wire services across America are screaming a headline that reads like a sci-fi B-movie. RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Coming from the 509th Bombardment Group, the literal atomic bomb-dropping elite of the U.S. military, the announcement carries terrifying, unassailable weight. For exactly 24 hours, humanity assumes Earth has officially joined the galactic community. Phase 5, General Ramey's Crafty Arts and Crafts Hour, July 9th, 1947. Naturally, high-ups in Texas take one look at the headlines, panic into a collective coronary, and realize that the nation's premier atomic base just accidentally admitted to catching an alien taxi. Emergency protocols activate. The real debris is whisked away on a B-29 to 8th Air Force Headquarters in Fort Worth, commanded by General Roger Ramey. On the afternoon of July 9th, Ramey holds a legendary press conference to aggressively walk it all back. He dumps a completely different pile of junk onto his office floor, shredded weather balloon rubber, tinfoil, and kite sticks, and has Base Weather Officer Irving Newton explain that Major Marcel simply hallucinated a flying saucer over a weather balloon. Poor Major Marcel is dragged in front of the cameras, forced to crouch beside the decoy trash, and made to point at a deflated balloon, like a schoolboy caught skipping class. And just like that, the greatest story of the 20th century vanished behind a wall of tinfoil and institutional embarrassment. The press bought the retraction, the public went back to worrying about mortgage rates, and the Roswell Incident quietly retired to the desert dust, waiting patiently for decades of investigative researchers to dig it back up and turn a botched weather kite cover-up into an immortal legend. For nearly 50 years, the official government line on the 1947 Roswell Incident was comfortingly boring. A standard-issue weather balloon had simply drifted down onto the Foster Ranch and frightened a few cows. But as public skepticism and congressional browbeating mounted in the early 1990s, that flimsy excuse began to sag like a cheap lawn chair. So the United States Air Force did something radical. They launched a massive multi-year declassified investigation and published the Roswell Report, Fact versus Fiction in the New Mexico Desert. They intended to finally put the whole flying saucer circus to bed. Instead, they accidentally admitted to something much funnier. The mysterious debris hauled out of the desert wasn't an alien spacecraft, but it was top-secret Cold War espionage hardware. Welcome to the wonderful world of Project Mogul. To appreciate why a pile of trash in a New Mexico pasture terrified the U.S. military, you have to remember the sheer panic of the post-World War II intelligence landscape. In August 1949, the Soviet Union successfully detonated its first atomic bomb, catching Washington completely flat-footed. But even a few years earlier, American officials were desperate to find a way to eavesdrop on Soviet nuclear tests without flying risky reconnaissance planes over enemy territory. Enter geophysicist Maurice Ewing with a brilliant, slightly unhinged idea. The atmosphere features a special sound channel way up in the stratosphere, where low-frequency noise can travel thousands of miles completely uninhibited. To tap into this atmospheric party line, scientists engineered Project Mogul. These weren't your average birthday party balloons. We are talking about massive trains of dozens of giant neoprene balloons tied together in a single file line, dangling sophisticated acoustic microphones and dragging elaborate radar reflectors made of hexagonal foil kites, balsa wood, and nylon tape. When rancher Mac Brazel stumbled across the wreckage, his description sounded like a shopping list from an intergalactic hardware store, which, as it turns out, is remarkably close to how early Cold War spy gear looks. Brazel found lightweight metallic foil that you could scrunch into a ball, only for it to instantly pop back into a flat sheet without a single crease. In reality, it was specialized radar reflector material built to survive punishing sub-zero temperatures and violent pressure shifts in the upper atmosphere. Those strange balsa-like wooden sticks that stubbornly refused to snap or catch fire. They were high-stress structural struts designed to keep the radar kites rigidly aligned. Witnesses whispered about strange floral symbols and pastel pink and purple geometric patterns printed on the tape securing the assembly. As it turns out, little green men were not leaving decorative scrapbook tape behind. It was just standard industrial adhesive tape from the Toyota Corporation, which frequently featured quirky manufacturing lots and floral branding during post-war rationing. The true genius and the absolute comedic tragedy of Project Mogul was its airtight, hyper-compartmentalized security. Because the project was tasked with listening for Soviet atomic bomb blasts, it was classified higher than a presidential secret. The NYU scientists and Alamogordo test crews operated in total isolation. Consequently, the poor folks stationed at the Roswell Army Airfield, including Base Commander Colonel William H. Blanchard and Intelligence Officer Major Jesse Marcel, were left completely out of the loop. They had never heard of Project Mogul. They had certainly never seen a multi-balloon acoustic surveillance train before. So when Mac Brazel waltzed into the sheriff's office with a truckload of space-age foil, unbreakable sticks, and radar kites, the local base intelligence officers examined material that looked like nothing produced by human aviation. Lacking any administrative framework to say, "Oh, that's just a top-secret spy kite," they logically concluded they were looking at a crashed ship from another world. Cue Walter Haut's historic, career-ruining flying disc press release. When the Air Force finally spilled the beans about Project Mogul in 1994, skeptics cheered, assuming the case was finally closed. But for UFO researchers and history buffs, the report achieved the exact opposite effect. By proving that the military had actively lied, swapped out debris in General Ramey's Fort Worth office, and weaponized a classified Cold War spy project to cover up an embarrassing public relations faceplant in 1947, the Air Force accidentally validated the core conspiracy theory. They proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the military was desperate to hide something extraordinary in the desert, and they would happily invent any story, even a weather balloon or a spy train, to bury the truth. Let's be honest for a moment. If the United States military ever actually managed to capture a genuine interstellar spacecraft, complete with a crew of 4-foot-tall, gray-skinned cosmic tourists, do you honestly think their master plan for a cover-up would be quick, grab some tinfoil, a few balsa wood sticks, and tell everyone it was a grumpy weather balloon, to the absolute delight of conspiracy theorists everywhere. The Air Force's official 1994 attempt to blame Project Mogul for the 1947 Roswell Incident solved the mystery of the shredded foil on the Foster Ranch, but it completely missed the main event. For the hardcore ufology community, Project Mogul is merely the opening act. The real story, the one involving intrepid investigators like Stanton Friedman, Kevin Randall, and Donald Schmitt spending decades hunting down aging witnesses, is a sprawling, multi-site sci-fi epic. While the Foster Ranch gave us a lovely assortment of indestructible tape and shiny plastic, it lacked the actual vehicle. For that, we have to travel 150 miles west, to the high-altitude plains of San Agustin, near Magdalena, New Mexico. According to accounts gathered from university professors and student field researchers, caught in the middle of nowhere in July 1947, they didn't just find a scattered mess, they found an intact, saucer-shaped craft embedded in the dirt. And they weren't alone. Standing or stumbling around this metallic marvel were supposedly a few diminutive, large-headed visitors who clearly hadn't checked the local Earth atmosphere advisory before steering into a New Mexico thunderstorm. Naturally, before anyone could exchange pleasantries or ask for directions back to the nearest galaxy, the military swooped in. Witnesses claim they were hastily ordered away at gunpoint by armed troops reciting poetry about treason and national security. If you're keeping score at home, this is where the narrative pivots from routine atmospheric research to panic-stricken men in uniform shoving aliens into crates. If you want a credible witness in a courtroom, you look for someone whose job description literally requires them not to be an idiot. Enter Major Jesse Marcel, the 509th Bombardment Group's intelligence officer, the very man who first touched the Foster Ranch wreckage. For decades, Marcel kept his military oath, nodding politely while the world was told it was just a weather balloon. But by the late 1970s, nuclear physicist and investigator Stanton Friedman tracked Marcel down and the dam broke. Marcel didn't just recant, he practically threw the official narrative under a bus. He confessed that the tinfoil and kite sticks General Ramey paraded around for the press in Fort Worth were a clumsy stage decoy. The real material he handled? Exceptionally lightweight, utterly indestructible, and, in his own unforgettable phrasing, not of this earth. Imagine the psychological toll of being a trained military intelligence professional forced to stand in front of flashing cameras and point at a shredded balloon while screaming internally. I literally held a piece of the cosmos in my hands yesterday. It's no wonder his defiance kicked off an avalanche of other whistleblowers. As the decades ticked by, aging veterans realized they couldn't take their classified secrets to the grave, or more accurately, they decided they didn't want to burn in the afterlife with a federal secret still lodged in their teeth. Take Walter Haut, the Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Officer, who originally signed off on the famous flying disc press release. Before passing away in 2005, Haut signed a sealed affidavit swearing that the weather balloon story was a total fabrication. He claimed he personally laid eyes on a recovered egg-shaped craft and small humanoid bodies sitting right there in a base hangar before they were spirited away. And where did all this cosmic contraband go? Naturally, it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. According to decades of whispered lore from military insiders, the wreckage and biological remains were funneled straight into the Foreign Technology Division, laying the bedrock for the legendary Hangar 18. It turns out that if you want to reverse engineer alien propulsion, you don't send it to NASA, you send it to Ohio. So, who do we believe? Skeptics will always argue that human memory is a pliable, nostalgic thing, that decades of campfire storytelling, sci-fi movies, and cultural myth-making naturally warped a few confused desert accounts into a grand interstellar epic. Yet, proponents of the crash retrieval hypothesis look at the sheer, stubborn volume of high-ranking military officers, engineers, and respectable ranchers who risked their reputations, pensions, and sanity to tell the exact same bizarre story, and shrug. Whether you chalk it up to an elaborate psychological coping mechanism, for Cold War paranoia, or the ultimate undeniable truth of human history, one thing remains certain. In July 1947, the United States military touched something so profoundly weird in the New Mexico dust that 75 years of press releases, weather balloons, and spy project confessions still haven't managed to clean up the mess. If you ever need a textbook example of how to accidentally launch a global cultural obsession in under 24 hours, look no further than the summer of 1947 in Chavez County, New Mexico. The legacy of the Roswell Incident is, if nothing else, a magnificent comedy of institutional errors. One day, the world's only nuclear-capable bomber wing issues a breathless press release, casually announcing, "Hey everyone, good news! We caught a flying saucer." The very next day, a visibly sweating general holds up a bundle of tinfoil and balsa wood and says, "Whoopsie-daisy, our mistake. It's just a completely ordinary weather balloon. Please go back to your radios and forget we said anything." Naturally, the American public did what any sensible population would do. They nodded politely, went home, and spent the next 8 decades dedicating their lives to uncovering the biggest cover-up in human history. You simply do not dangle an extraterrestrial spacecraft in front of humanity's face on a Tuesday and expect everyone to be satisfied with a weather kite on Wednesday. In that single, chaotic week, the modern conspiracy theory was officially born. Before Roswell, government suspicion was mostly a localized sport reserved for tax season. After Roswell, the idea that shadowy men in dark suits were stashing interstellar hardware in secret underground bunkers became the default lens through which we view authority. Roswell didn't just spark a debate about life in the cosmos, it built the entire foundation of the X-Files universe, popularized the image of the almond-eyed gray alien, and cemented the crashed flying disc as an indelible pillar of pop culture. There is also a wonderful cosmic irony at the heart of the whole affair. If you subscribe to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, you have to accept that an advanced, multi-dimensional civilization, capable of folding space-time, crossing trillions of miles of interstellar void, and defying the laws of physics somehow met its ultimate match in a routine New Mexico thunderstorm. Apparently, faster-than-light propulsion is no match for a brisk southwestern gust and a patch of desert scrub. On the other hand, if you believe the official prosaic explanation that it was merely a top-secret Cold War espionage array called Project Mogul, the punchline is almost as good. The military was so terrified of admitting they were spying on the Soviets that they accidentally let the world believe they had captured a Martian taxi service. More than 75 years later, Roswell's true legacy isn't just about whether little green or gray men actually touched down in the desert. It is about the permanent, unbridgeable divide carved between official state assurances and public intuition. It transformed a quiet ranching town into the neon-lit, alien-themed tourist capital of the world, complete with saucer-shaped street lamps and extraterrestrial gift shops, while leaving behind a mystery that refuses to die. Whether what fell into the New Mexico dust was a Soviet listening balloon, a secret spy prototype, or an unlucky cosmic visitor who forgot to check the local weather forecast, one thing is certain. Roswell forever broke our boring reality, and honestly, our imaginations have been far better off for it. If you had told anyone back in the 1950s that the United States government would one day stand before a public court, hand over hundreds of declassified military videos of glowing orbs doing impossible physics maneuvers, and officially announce its grand conclusion to the world, what would you have expected? Maybe a dramatic presidential address on primetime television? A grand unveiling of an alien spaceship on the White House lawn? Instead, after years of intense pressure, congressional hearings, and whistleblowers risking everything, the ultimate legal verdict delivered by the U.S. military and court system ended up being the most aggressively anticlimactic shrug in human history. Yes, it exists, but we honestly have no idea what it is or where it came from. Honestly, as someone who prophesied this exact brand of institutional tap dancing, I'm not even remotely surprised. It is the ultimate bureaucratic get-out-of-jail-free card. Right now, the entire disclosure movement is treating the U.S. government and the courts like a stubborn vending machine. Everyone is hammering the buttons, demanding the absolute jackpot. Undeniable proof of crashed extraterrestrial saucers, dead alien bodies in a freezer, and a full confession from the deep state about decades of reverse-engineered reverse gravity technology. We want the keys to the anti-gravity saucer, and we want them now. Instead, the courts gave us a theatrical divine comedy. Sure, we've had incredible military whistleblowers step forward under oath to talk about impossible craft and high-strangeness encounters. But when the dust settles in a court of law, the legal system can only stretch so far before it snaps back into bureaucratic self-preservation. They are happy to admit there are unexplainable things zooming around our airspace. They are never going to admit that a shadowy cabal of unelected officials has been playing ping pong with alien technology in a secret underground bunker since the Truman administration. So let's ask the trillion-dollar question that keeps ufologists up at night. Did the U.S. military actually recover crashed UFO remnants, exactly as Bob Lazar bravely blew the whistle on decades ago? Or are we all just hopelessly addicted to the high-octane, space opera narratives pumped out by Gaia TV series, like Cosmic Disclosure, complete with secret space programs, interstellar federations, and galactic trade deals? Let's look at Bob Lazar. Back in 1989, when he first sat in front of a Las Vegas news camera and casually dropped the term S4 inches and element 115, the world treated him like he had lost his mind. Yet, decades later, when the Pentagon casually starts confirming anomalous aerospace phenomena and river engineering programs, Lazar's old stories suddenly look less like sci-fi fanfiction and more like an uncomfortable spoiler alert. Whether you buy every word he said or think he just had the most imaginative career review in history, Lazar set the blueprint for every modern whistleblower who walked into a congressional hearing room decades later. On the flip side, you have the digital entertainment complex, networks like Gaia, where guests talk about secret space fleets defending Mars from hostile reptilians, like they are discussing their weekend golf game. It's wonderfully entertaining, but it turns the profound, silent mystery of non-human intelligence into a Saturday morning cartoon with an existential budget. Here is the funny reality of where we stand today. The truth is probably hiding right in the uncomfortable middle. The military did stumble across things in the New Mexico desert in 1947 that broke their brains. They did lock it away behind impossible walls of compartmentalization because they didn't know how to handle the physics, the religion, or the public panic. But did they successfully river engineer a fleet of flying saucers and build a Star Trek Navy on the dark side of the moon? Humans are notoriously messy builders. If we actually had alien technology for 80 years, our public infrastructure would look a lot less like crumbling potholes and a lot more like Coruscant. The disclosure movement is going to keep rolling through the courts, fighting for every scrap of paper and every grain of whistleblowing testimony. But at the end of the day, the universe isn't going to hand over its cosmic blueprints just because a federal judge signed a subpoena. The mystery remains right where it has always been, dangling just out of reach, waiting for us to evolve past our own theatrical comedy and finally look up with open eyes. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.